and welcome to this edition of Conversations with the Sheriff. My name is Joe McDonald, and I am the Plymouth County Sheriff. It's a great pleasure to be here today, and I've got some very interesting guests, I think. We're going to be talking with Captain Michael Knight and Lieutenant Brian Farrell from my office, who are our two firearms trainers within the Sheriff's Office. And they've got a lot of interesting things to share with us today because really training is something that I cannot overstate the importance of. And it goes really to the heart of what we do. So one of the things that I did want to talk about today, and we'll go into a number of different directions because you guys do have so much to talk about today, but we wanted to talk about first, because we get a lot of questions about this, about the MILO system. And, what is MILO? MILO is, we were kidding around a little bit earlier that in law enforcement, much like the military, we're very fond of acronyms. So you have what's known generally as a FATS system, F-A-T-S. And what that is a firearms training simulator system. And MILO, M-I-L-O, is a more specific type of firearms training simulator. And that acronym stands for Multiple Interactive Learning Objectives. It's a multi-dimensional, high-definition system that presents the officers with realistic interactive scenarios in which they learn how to de-escalate situations, how to deal with what can be very volatile situations that they may well have to respond to as a law enforcement officer. And hopefully, everyone walks away from that scenario safe. And I mean safe in the simulated sense of that word, because there are no real firearms that are used in the MILO system. It's all a simulator. And the best way that I could describe that, and I'll have our trainers do that as well, it's basically, if you were to see that, if you came into the place where it is, you'd say it looks a lot like a very high-end video presentation, like a high-end video game. But it's much more detailed and involved than that. So let me throw this over to you guys. And, what do you think about the MILO system? How has it worked out for you? How do you use those scenarios? And, it's also important to note that we're not the only agency that's using these. And training is best done when it's done together. We all come together. And a lot of these assets that we have at the Sheriff's Office are used not just by the employees at the Sheriff's Office, but also by local law enforcement agencies locally. So it's a great system. It's a great program that we got going there. So, Captain, why don't you kick it off? How long have we had the MILO system? How did we find out about it?
Yeah,
what do you think of it?
Thank you, Sheriff. So the MILO system, we've had it for probably about 3 years now. We incorporated it into our training regiment program for MPTC because that's what we fall under.
Mm-hmm. And here again, an acronym, which folks might know. MPTC is the Massachusetts Municipal Police Training Commission, MPTC.
So, and that's what regulates all of our guidelines, our training standards. So with the MILO, we've had it about 3 years and it's set up in, a lot of people refer to it as a big video game, right? But the reason we do it, and it's so what's the word I'm looking for? It's so beneficial, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're so thankful that you allowed us to bring this into our department and our agency, is because it brings that real world situation into our officers without putting them in that real world situation, right?
Yeah.
So they can train to it without being actually in it, right? So we like to say that chance favors the prepared mind, and that's exactly what it allows them to do in that training situation. So when they do go out to the real world, they can mentally prepare themselves for it. So when they encounter real world, hopefully they'll resort back to their training and be mentally prepared for it, right?
Yeah. I think it's also it's interesting for people to hear, but I think important for us to state. Why don't we just go into a little bit of the background that you gentlemen bring to this training? I know that both of you started as corrections officers within the Sheriff's Office and worked into these specialties. But Captain, why don't you state for the folks at home how it is you got started and what positions you've held within the agency before you rose to captain of training?
Thanks, Sheriff. So I started in late 2012. I was a correctional officer, and then I went to transportation for a little while, and then I went over to our warrant unit, and from there I got promoted into the firearms division as a lieutenant, and then I recently moved up to captain of the firearms division, and extremely grateful. I have excellent training.
Yeah.
Became a firearms instructor for pistol, rifle, and shotgun. I teach applied patrol procedures, MILO, use of force, defensive tactics, and it's overall it's excellent for the agency because they all incorporate together.
Yeah.
Right. Just for firearms alone, you're always using that defensive tactics, the use of force, the applied patrol. They all incorporate together.
Yeah, and that's important for people to understand that it's not simply training with firearms. It's training the officer to deal with all defensive tactics,
Agreed.
Whether that is verbally, how to de-escalate those situations, or, God forbid you have to go hands-on, someone attacks you physically, you have to know how to deal with that kind of an issue. And, ultimately up through that continuum up to firearms. So it's great that you're able to do that. And I think it's also great, that both of you guys started as corrections officers. So I think it's also important for the folks at home to understand that, corrections officers are we get these questions all the time. What's the difference between deputy sheriffs and police, or corrections officers and deputy sheriffs? And we could do a whole show on that. But suffice it to say, the training that we do, now we have the MPTC that you've referred to, the Municipal Police Training Commission, but also we have the MSA, the Mass Sheriff's Association, which is a parallel agency to the MPTC that monitors and dictates what our training needs to be. Now, most of the time, and I think this is probably a good thing, those standards are going to reflect each other, the MPTC and the MSA standards. So all of us train to that same high level of preparation, which I think is so important for not just the safety of our officers, but the public in general. So in our academy as corrections officers, you did receive the rudiments of these types of training to get these things going. But it's great the way that you have been able to branch out from MSA, but also to hold those certifications through the MPTC. So you are certified not just as trainers of deputy sheriffs, but also trainers of local police. And I think that's an important thing to note. And, hats off to you guys. Congratulations for meeting that high standard and maintaining those high standards for both, really.
Thank you, Sheriff. So
let me throw it over to you, Lieutenant. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, Lieutenant Brian Farrell. I started in 2007 in corrections. I was inside for about 10 years, actually exactly 10 years, from general population to ADSEG to central control. From there, I got promoted, well, not promoted, but I was assigned to the K-9 unit for 8 years, where I ran one partner, Danny, in patrol and ballistics. And then just recently got promoted to Lieutenant Firearms.
Very nice. And I think it's great that you also bring a varied background, a great resume for the experience that you've had. Both of you having worked in corrections, and I am of the opinion, and I think a lot of police chiefs that I've spoken to anyway share the opinion that I do, that the training that you receive in corrections is amongst the best in all of law enforcement, because when someone is working inside a correctional facility, you're dealing with individuals who have transgressed in such a way that they're actually in jail now. And the only thing that you have to deal with these folks that we have in our care and custody is this, your head and your mouth. You don't have firearms in the jail of any kind. And it's important. The de-escalation skills that you learn there, I think, really translate over. And I think, if you go to the south or to the west, where a lot of sheriff's offices do frontline patrol work, I think the reason they start people inside correctional facilities, inside the jails, is for that very reason, because you learn those skills and you develop those skills. And the good news is, on the front end, and you guys weren't part of this process necessarily, but I am each time, whenever we're assessing people to see who would be a good corrections officer, one of the things we look for are those good verbal skills and an ability to de-escalate those situations. So that's something that I think is very, very important. Having been on the canine unit, you've done tracks, you know how those things work. Mike, you were on the warrant unit, and what the warrant unit is, for folks that don't necessarily know, is we have a unit within the sheriff's office that will assist our local police departments and the courts with trained law enforcement deputy sheriffs to go out and apprehend individuals who have warrants out for their arrest from the courts for various reasons. So it's a wealth of experience. I think it's great. It gives you guys, credibility within the agency, but also credibility on the outside, which is very, very important. I know that, training, like anything else, varies in quality and in quantity by where you go or where you are. But I'm very proud of what we do here and what you guys have been able to accomplish up in our firearms training, and really the training unit in general. But specifically with the MILO, Brian, what is your impression of MILO?
So I can speak to, especially running through it as a canine deputy. It was really excellent because you're able to bring in so much outside stimuli. Our system is set up so we have 180 degrees, so it's just not a flat screen. You have to work the whole problem out.
Yeah.
It's really good. I think my biggest takeaway is a lot with EDP, emotionally disturbed people.
Yes.
And how it's becoming such an issue out on the streets.
Yes.
And it really lets you use your tactics and your verbal skills to de-escalate the situation. Because as we all know, things can go one way or the other. It can get escalated, or sometimes you can just talk that person into compliance. And that training was my favorite for MILO.
Yeah. It's interesting. We've described it, the captain has described it as like a video game. And in some sense, it does appear, at least to an untrained observer, that that's what it is. But what I think is really beneficial and helpful with this training is you can get training modules for this. And as you said, it's 180 degrees of video. So you are almost enveloped in what is going on in the scenarios. And you can get pre-made scenarios, so you can have an active shooter in a school, or you can have, a disgruntled person at a workplace, those types of scenarios. But what's really great, in my opinion, is the fact that we have the ability to go in and to actually film our location. So we could go into the correctional facility, we could go into the jail, and we could film an inmate uprising or an inmate disturbance inside there, or a fight in a unit or something like that. Or you could do a local manufacturing facility, or a local school, or local public building, a town hall.
Right.
So we do have that ability, and I think it's important, that folks understand. So describe how, as an officer or a deputy, you would train using this MILO. So you're standing there, you've got 180 degrees of movie screens essentially surrounding you,
Right.
a very high-tech sound system. So you're going to hear and see people on the screen. Can you interact with those people?
So the way you almost feel as if you're stepping into the actual scenario, right? With the 180 screen, you step up and you're within a certain distance from the screen. When you step in, behind each screen is a really loud subwoofer speaker. They can't see that. And in the ceiling is the lasers that react to either the firearm, which is an electronically firearm.
Yeah.
So it's a Glock 17, so it's the exact firearm that the officer would carry on the street. So it's that familiarization with training, right? So you have Glock 17, you have OC that reacts with the screen.
Yeah, and OC is the pepper spray.
It's pepper spray.
Yeah.
And then you have a flashlight as well that will react to the screen.
Mm.
So it's very realistic. You would step in, and then whatever the scenario may be, you start talking with the screen, just as it is real world.
Mm-hmm.
And then us as instructors, we would sit there, and how you react to the screen is how we can dictate how the scenario goes, right?
So the individual officer will interact with someone he sees on the screen, and depending on how that officer is acting, you can make the person on the screen react in
Correct.
different ways. Yeah, that's
Absolutely
great.
correct.
That's really good training, because things in real life are unpredictable.
Correct.
No matter what you're doing, So to bring in that same level of unpredictability to the training, I think is going to enhance the realism of that. You had said now the firearms are modeled upon Glock Model 17, and they're laser, so they're operated. Well, how do they operate? Let me ask you that.
It's operated by a laser. So when you press on the trigger,
Mm-hmm.
it emulates a laser that comes out, and then it reacts to a laser that's built into the ceiling. So it's very realistic. They're very accurate.
Okay. So when you say a laser, so when a trigger is pulled on one of these training firearms, a beam of light is emitted from that firearm.
From the muzzle of the gun.
Yep.
It hits the screen.
Okay.
That we've already preset.
Yep.
And then it reacts to the laser in the ceiling.
Uh-huh.
Those two meet at an axis.
Yeah.
And that's how it tells you how accurate it is.
Oh, okay. So, and you, I would imagine you're going to calibrate those laser firearms before you use them to
Between every scenario, we
All right.
calibrate them. Yes.
Well, that's a good thing to do because that's realistic as well. You know,
Right.
I think that's important. So you have someone, and an officer or a group. Do you have groups of officers? Let me ask you that. I know individuals I've seen, but do you do larger groups?
We do. We can run 2. Usually 2 is our max.
Okay. All right. And 2 would simulate an officer and a partner?
Correct.
Yeah. All right. So that's a good way to do it, I think. The training that is done is important, but what can also be very important is what do you do after the training? Someone does a great job, and you want to say that, but let's say someone comes in and they do, well, they make what you think there are ways to improve their reactions. How do you guys handle that?
It's debrief. One of the most important parts is the debrief.
Okay,
right?
a debrief. So you meet with those individuals after the scenario is done.
So the benefit about MILO is that we can rewind everything and break it down scene by scene.
All right. So the video, as it runs, you're recording
It's recording.
the officer and their reactions
Correct.
and actions, right?
It's a forward-facing camera
Uh-huh.
that records everything that the room is doing. So everything in the room is being recorded along with the screen. So if the officer thinks that they did one thing, and we as instructors are like, "Oh, you reacted a little too slow."
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, "No, I pulled my firearm, my OC at a certain point." We can rewind it, show them what the screen was doing
Yeah.
versus their reactionary time.
Yeah.
And it's a great teaching tool
Yeah.
for the officer.
I would imagine that it is, because I think sometimes, and having seen individuals train with this, very oftentimes what people do differs from what they think they did. And I was impressed that you were able to run the film back and show that, well, the bad guy shot his gun before you had yours out of the holster. And when you did get the gun out of the holster and you shot, your shots went into the ceiling or your shots went into the floor. So I think it's important for us to debrief in that sense, so that those types of things like marksmanship can be worked upon. But I think what's also even more important than that is, how did they talk to people? How did the individuals that they saw on the video react to them, and how did they react in return?
Agreed, because that's one of our most important parts, right? So we're firearms instructors primarily, but our firearm is our last resort. That's the last thing we ever want to use,
Yeah.
right? So our most important tool is our communication,
Yeah.
is our de-escalation.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we try to harp on and teach on the most. So that's what we want our officers to achieve, and that's what we want them to succeed right off the start.
Yeah.
Is talking.
Yeah. Well, we have a little bit of an advantage in that sense because, we choose folks for these positions that have an aptitude for those types of things, and it's trained. And then working in a correctional facility, it's lived. So that's great. So we can do all kinds of training scenarios inside these computer simulations, which are wonderful. But let's talk a little bit about the real world scenarios. Do you guys engage in firearms training with officers and deputy sheriffs with real firearms and live ammunition as well?
We do.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about that. Where do we do it? What do we do?
Okay.
So I was afforded the opportunity to be part of the Metrolec SWAT team as an operator formerly.
Yeah.
And
Let me stop you right there for
excuse me.
1 second,
Yes.
only because we're throwing out more acronyms.
Okay.
Metrolec. anytime you hear the expression LEC, it's LEC, which is Law Enforcement Council. The Metro LEC is the Metropolitan Boston Law Enforcement Council. Now, we are members of the Metro LEC, but also the SEMLEC, which, again, another acronym, Southeastern Massachusetts Law Enforcement Council. And what those are essentially large mutual aid agreements between all of our law enforcement agencies, so that when there is an event, let's say, that requires more assets than any one department can bring to bear, that's when we join in and help. So I'm sorry to interrupt you,
Yeah.
but it's easy for us to throw out the acronyms, but we want people to
Yes.
have a good understanding.
So there was a lot of training off-site with all these agencies, all coming together using force-on-force, sim guns. And it's just really good running real-world scenarios, running through them, and then the most important part is the debriefs. And we would debrief every single scenario, go over what we did right, what we did wrong. But it's really good to get out there within the community and make those connections to the outside departments that we assist. A lot of good training comes back that we can then bring into with our officers, our deputies, our correction officers, everything.
That's great. One of the things, too, that I think bears mentioning here is our firearms training trailer, the mobile range that we have. Now, we recently purchased a newer one, and we've had this or had a mobile firing range since before I was the sheriff, which is 20 years now. So I think that's a valuable thing. Describe that a little bit, how we use it, and what outside agencies use that as well.
So we have our mobile range. It's a 3-lane range. Ultimately it's a 53-foot tractor trailer, right? And fully ballistic all the way around. Inside there's an office control panel that controls the 3 lanes. It's exact same setup as an outdoor range for, again, going to back to that full letter acronym, MPTC, because those are the firearm standards that we go by. So we simulate a 15-yard line, a 10, a 7, a 5, and a 3. Those are our qualification lines. And inside we can do that. So we can qualify 3 shooters at a time, full ballistic back setup, and then it's
And when you say full ballistic, what that means is that it's essentially bulletproof.
bulletproof.
It's going to contain any. So this is live ammunition that's being fired inside there.
Yes, sir.
It's a real range.
Sir.
And we don't want any rounds escaping, so that's what the full ballistic means. And it's a great thing. And it's great in the sense because it's an enclosed environment. You can do things with that, like low light or nighttime firing exercises, so that when you have individuals who we want to train them on shift, because that'll save us overtime, and also our local police departments as well, you can bring people in there at noontime and do nighttime exercises.
Correct. We can shut the lights off. We have blue lights and sirens inside of it, so we can create that real world scenario inside of a training atmosphere. It's a huge asset. And you, Sheriff, you just mentioned outside agencies, right?
Yeah.
So that's another benefit that you've allowed, and it's a huge benefit to outside agencies, right? So within Plymouth County, that's something that we allow police departments within the county. We bring our trailer there, our mobile range, and allows their officers to train.
Yeah, which is, that's important to note, because sometimes I'll get a question from someone I run into in public. I'll be at Walmart and, hey, I saw a tractor trailer and it had really no markings on the outside of it, but it was pulled by a tractor that had sheriff's office. Why do you guys have? Are you delivering things? Well, we are, but it's important that people know that range can move around. So what we'll do is we'll move that range. Let's say I know that up in Norfolk County, they've used it through Canton PD. We need a place that has a large enough area to place this. So they'll drive it up there, and while it's up in Norfolk County, our colleagues up there have the access to that. And what they'll do is run as many officers through, and not just from Canton, even though it's the trailer is in Canton. What it does is it allows those police departments within that local municipality and beyond to come and to use that asset and to qualify their officers. So that's a great thing, and I'm glad we're able to do that. And I know you guys have done that under the auspice of Metrolec, under Semlec. Any other unusual places we may have gone with that?
So sometimes we go down to Newport, Rhode Island. We do the Detectives
Oh
Association.
yes, yeah, that's
right, we support them.
the New England Narcotics. Yeah,
Narcotics.
yeah, that's the New England Narcotics Officers Association. They do some training scenarios. So yeah, so we're all over creation with our training assets, and I think that's great because the unit cost on this particular range apparatus is huge. I can't even remember what the numbers were on that, but they're hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then the maintenance on them too. And that's something that a lot of folks don't think about. When you start expending thousands of rounds of ammunition inside of this range, it's going to require some maintenance. What do you guys do? You do the maintenance? Do you have outside people do the maintenance? How does that work?
So we subcontract the lead contamination and de-leading of the cleaning. That's twice a year, every 6 months. We have a company come in, and they'll recycle all the lead. What they do is take all the rubber out, clean it, put it back in, take all the lead out. So that's done by them. Everything else that we do in-house.
Nice. So the daily maintenance you guys would do.
Change the filters, make sure it's clean.
Yeah. And, so people understand how that's going. And the filters are very important because, and I learned a lot about this when we were looking, at one time were looking to build an indoor stationary range. And you want to know, I know that the ammo that you use inside the indoor, and really any indoor range, should be lead-free. And when we say lead-free, and people say, if it's lead-free, why are you cleaning lead? Well, there is an explanation to that because the lead isn't necessarily coming, or the vaporized lead, from the projectile. It's coming from the primers. So that's what you want. You want the lead-free primers. So there may be lead, metallic lead, that is going to be inside the rubber medium that stops those bullets. So it's really it's important. The other thing that I do want to mention is that you guys will have your blood tested on a regular basis for lead contamination. Is that right?
Yes, sir. We do.
Good.
Yep.
Good.
Yes, sir.
Well, I would imagine that's standard operating procedure, but it's really important to us that you're out there, you're doing this. Training is probably one of the single most important things that we do on a daily basis. So I thank you guys for coming here today, but I thank you for your efforts every day, training our folks, but also those brothers and sisters in law enforcement at other agencies. So thanks for everything you do.
And we thank you for the opportunity and the ability to allow us to do what we do.
Great.
It's nothing but a benefit
Yeah.
to our own agency and the county.
Excellent.
So thank you, Sheriff.
All right.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Well, we thank you. Well, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank our firearms instructors for coming in today, and I want to thank you, the folks at home, for tuning in and listening to what it is we have to say. I hope you found it interesting. These conversations with the sheriff will continue. We'll bring individuals in law enforcement and maybe some other aspects that you haven't considered, and have full conversations with them, and hopefully get information out and help you learn a little bit about what it is that we do every day. But I thank you, and we hope to see you soon.